¿Me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan? ¿Estoy aquí? 1, 2, 3.
Hi, so we will begin with this session. I'm here representing Rosaura Ruiz. She couldn't be here. She's very sorry about that. We will begin with Vladimir Storm. Each one of you will have 2 minutes to make your presentation. I will be sitting right there, so I will let you know when you have 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and 1 minute.
But can I ask something?
Yeah, sure.
Because
we will move.
are we sitting here during all the presentations?
No, just no review stuff. You're the one for who
Yes.
we have to. Okay. So we had some questions about the location tomorrow. Tomorrow, the Congress will be held at UNAM, at the Instituto de Investigaciones Filosóficas. To get there, you can get there by subway. You get off on the line of Universidad, and then you can take a Pumabus. It's called Pumabus. You go out of the subway and ask anyone where the line 1 goes, and it will take you directly to the Instituto de Investigaciones Filosóficas. So I think we can have a little map for you by email. I will ask my Antonia if we can let you have a map or on the site maybe. So we will be starting with Vladimir Storm. The questions will be at the end of all the presentations. Okay?
Excuse me? Would it be possible to dim the lights here in the audience during the presentations?
Yes.
Thank you.
Vladimir Storm. It's from Private Debt Germany.
Hey, hi everyone. Okay, we'll start. My name is Vladimir Storm. I do visual arts and digital anthropology in various digital art projects. This is like a small video of the different projects I did for the last several years. I have a background in physics and computer graphics, and but when virtual reality started in 2015, I got introduced to a lot of different scenes, and I've been researching a lot of different things, and I still do projects and different scenes, like working with the filmmakers, working with the game scene, working with different digital artists and academic artists. And today I'm going to talk about sexuality in VR. First of all, I want to start with this video. So this is a movie from 90s. It's called More Man. Basically, it's the first scene I saw about virtual reality sex. It was like a sci-fi movie from 90s, where two people going to virtual reality and experience this weird digital sex morphing together. And what we have now, what we have in 2018, and what we have now is this. This is like the most advanced VR interactive VR experiences. Like what we have here is like all this body horror, contorted, glitched mess. But let's go from one thing to another. It's like most of the people, what I realized when I get my first VR headset and I started to talk to people about VR porn and sexual content, is I realized not many people actually tried anything, because most of the VR headsets were just at the companies and like in the business in the universities and in the companies, so like no one really could try this content except like porn industry. And most of the things you heard of is just 360 porn, which is like a single point of view videos. Like most of the people who coming from a film industry, they just started to do 360, which is like non-interactive single point of view experiences. But like what I want to talk today about is about the different communities around the world creating DIY interactive porn. And I found this is really interesting, and not many people really talking about this. Okay, the first one I want to start with is called this is My Little Pony VR porn experience. So My Little Pony is the biggest fandom community in the world. Like fandom is basically a community built around certain brand or character. And I found this fascinating, that people basically creating this crazy content, interactive content, where you can have sex with My Little Pony. The community is really big, and there's like a lot of fans of My Little Pony, which don't like do any sexual stuff, just like My Little Pony, and they call bronies, like, and there are people who like sexual stuff, and they call poppers. And even before virtual reality, you can find all the different sexual content connected to this brand, which is like all this weird inflatable, like half horse, half like human, like dolls, sex dolls, and Alibaba, and like all the very crazy stuff. The other one experience, the next experience I want to mention is called Euphilicious, and it's coming from a furry community. Furry is a subculture, and I think a lot of you have heard of it. It's people who associate with like them with animals. And it's not actually, like, most of the people not connected to any sexual stuff, but like there are people who also express their sexuality being an animal. And it's really interesting to see how it all developed in the era of virtual reality, that people actually creating content and interactive experiences based on a furry subculture. Yeah, in fact, this experience is most successful experience in interactive VR, sexual content experience. And as you can see, you have all this weird anthropomorph creatures, like called horse, called dragon, and you have all the weird genitalia here, also like combined, like penis and vagina at the same time. Well, I want to mention this website called Patreon. It's basically one of the main platforms which let this happen, like why people make this kind of content. So basically, there's this platform where people can support content creators. Basically, this platform allows communities support content creators and build what they want. I think this is really incredible. Like that things like this can happen nowadays, and I think half of Patreon is just really about furry community, where basically if you have some fetish or like something you like, you can support an artist to do this and pay him money, and it's like goes directly, not through some third party thing. The next thing I want to mention is like one of the first interactive VR sex games called Viper Sex Simulator, and it was based on this virtual character called Hatsune Miku, which is a virtual pop star. And the funny thing is that this is not a cartoon character, not like a movie character. This is like exists by its own. Hatsune Miku is like one of the many Vocaloid virtual pop stars. It doesn't exist in real life, this person, but there are concerts where a lot of fans coming and listening to this virtual pop star sing hologram. And yeah, it's funny that people made porn version of it. Talking about making porn version of whatever, there is this thing called Rule 34 on internet, which basically says that if there is something in internet, there is a porn version of it. And there are like various websites which just like fandom websites where people draw sexual content based on popular like characters. And I made the research and to see what are the three like top names in these websites, and I found that it's My Little Pony and Overwatch and Pokemon. Wait, yes, no. Pokemon. Yeah, I mixed up. So there's a story. So there is one main website which existed before VR where people made this content. They made the Pokemon porn, and once you put in Google Pokemon porn, you come to this website. And Nintendo basically wanted to sue them and said, "We're gonna shut down your website," and they had to change it and call it Pokemon. So it's like officially Pokemon porn call it is. There are other communities like this one, for example. It's a Source filmmaker community. There was this video game called Half-Life, and there was a special mode where people could put their own content and make their own movies. And basically, people started to create all this real weird content and make movies with it. Basically, making 3D sexual content with all this crazy monster porn, and like you can find anything there, like horror porn, like really strange 3D characters. And later, when people start to do VR, there are like people who start to import all this 3D content already existing before, which was existing before, like into VR, that people could see it, like walk around it and interact with it. This experience I want to mention also called Virtamate, and this is basically the most advanced physics experience which ever exists. Because most of the interactive VR porn experiences, they're really clunky. They don't really work. Like to be honest, like when you're playing, there's something always broken. But this one is like really well made, and it has this kind of physics when you're touching something, it really responds. And one of the updates, they had this scene with a giantess, like a big lady, and if you interact with her, you can put this guy inside of her. It's super weird. Yeah, this really feels really strange when you're really playing this, because it feels semi like realistic and weird at the same time. Talking about giantess, so apparently this thing existed before, like this fetish giantess, like they have really giant ladies, and it's coming mostly from a fandom fetish. And I talked to one person. I took an interview with the guy who made this game, Fandom VR. I took an interview with this guy, and he lives in Finland, and he basically making a living of making VR porn games. And he told me that a lot of people who were buying the game, they asked him to leave all these really giant, like, lady statues in the experience. So apparently, giantess is something like VR related fetish, which is really interesting because it's like something very special. But talking about this experience is incredible. Like, basically, I tried really a lot of different VR experiences with sexual content. But this one, I think, very special because instead of just put two bodies in the empty room, this guy came up with a whole story. Like, basically, the story is like you're traveling in the jungle and you're finding this femdom temple. And he designed basically everything that, like, he designed the jungle, this entrance, you're coming there and you have on the walls this like crazy pictures, you're coming inside, there's like a whole story where like you put in this weird room and lasers coming to your eyes and you're getting hypnotized. He didn't have to do this, like, because it's not, but in the same time, I think it's really an art piece. And I talked to him like this is incredible. I think one of the best things I ever saw. And he told me this one funny thing. Asked him like how he makes sound for this experience because like how he makes sound for the VR sexual game. And he said he worked with some scientists who knew how to make a special like music to set you in a certain like mood. I didn't know that, but apparently it exists. I'll skip this. Skip this. Well, yeah, this is like how people create these games, which is also really strange. Reading all this blogs, like of people, of developers, that how they make special effects for to make realistic pantyhose or like it's really weird. Like this all content. Okay, holoporn. So basically, augmented reality porn called holoporn, and I think this year it's finally kind of started to move. Like, but the problem is there is no really augmented reality hardware which people can use to experience the experiences. So there's like just few companies trying to do stuff, and the same companies which did virtual reality before and now trying to do AR sexual content. But what I want to mention is this one Japanese one called AR Kanojo, AR Girlfriend, and there's like different. There's a big topic in augmented reality scene about creating virtual avatars and virtual boyfriends and girlfriends, which I think will be a big topic, but so far it's like right now it's too soon to talk about this. Well, next thing is toys, like what kind of hardware people use to experience this stuff. Well, there are all sorts of like toys, but to be honest, they all like it's a joke. Like it's just made for like the people can buy it. I met one guy in Berlin who makes sex toys. Is like you don't usually meet people like like this, but I asked him a lot of questions. How it's like working on the background, like what's the ideas, and he told me like a lot of interesting aspects, and that all these mechanical parts are super loud. Like he said, they sound like a vacuum cleaner, and everyone will hear what you do. Well, talking about next thing I want to mention is events. Like, so there are different virtual reality events, and I mostly go to a lot of virtual reality conferences. The main VR like foreign event called the Adult VR Fest, and it's in Tokyo, and there were like several of them already. The very first one got shut down because too many people came, so it didn't happen. But in Japan is incredible what kind of ideas they pitch at these events. It's like I would never see something like this in Europe. It's like I think for Europeans it feels real weird, like what you can teach and what you can find on all this trade fair. Yeah, I want to mention this one thing. So since 2015, 2016, I made a few like events, like a home parties called DIY hentai home party, just inviting friends playing VR board games. And I found this really interesting because like I do a lot of other virtual reality experiences, and I research a lot of perception. Like I believe that different people perceive differently interactive experiences, and most of the VR sexual content experiences made by man for man, and it's really interesting when diverse people like experience them. It's just really interesting to see how people like how different people like perceive the experiences. Sometimes it's just really interesting, and also it's a really fun thing because like it's not what it's meant to be. It has nothing sexual when you're just watching people playing this stuff. It's just super funny because everything is really like yeah, you have this weird body horror, and it's just super fun. So yeah, as a conclusion, I want to say we're at the very beginning, and virtual reality is the medium where we can abstract our bodies from our minds, and this allows us basically become whoever we want, and we can represent our bodies the way we want, and we can represent our sexuality the way we want. And there's not really that many experiences made with this idea. And I hope there will be more people experimenting with this, with the body representation and sexual, yeah, like sexuality representation in VR. I think this is like something which hasn't been done that much. Hey, the end. Yeah, wow, it's cool. I thought 20 minutes is not that long yet. Well, yeah, so my name is Vladimir Storm. You can find me in the internet. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Vladimir. We will be following with Byron Rich and Liz Prince. Do you need us to move the table? Byron Rich and Liz Prince.
So you don't need us to move the table?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Do you know where?
Did you do your presentation?
That's what I'm going for.
No.
I like it.
Is the only file?
Okay, so we are all set. Byron Rich is from Allegheny College in Canada, and Liz is an independent artist working in the US.
Hi, everybody. So this is our project. It's called Epicurean Endocrinology. This is sort of the umbrella project under which exists other mini projects that we're working on, and we'll sort of work up to our most recent presentation, which we're launching now-ish.
So I'll tell you a little bit. Liz and I have been working together now for about 2.5 or 3 years on projects related to industrial agriculture, like food systems, especially as they relate to North America, and endocrine disruptors and how those relate to any idea around body autonomy. And I know body autonomy came up earlier, but we don't need to get too into the weeds about that yet. Maybe in our question period we can. So I'll go into this a little bit. What we're really looking at is hacking hormones as a act of biotechnical resistance, and by resistance we mean resistance to entrenched, marginalizing cultural norms. So what we're really thinking about is whether or not we can find, extract, and deploy endocrine disruptors from unnatural sources, so xenoestrogens and phytoestrogens, which we'll find in a minute, and use them as biotechnical tools of resistance against this marginalizing system. So background, the endocrine system is a network of glands whose primary function is hormone secretion, yada, yada, yada. You can read the rest. I'm not going to read my slide. Go for it.
Going for it. So we're kind of specifically interested in the sex hormones, and of course, the glands include all of the glands, including things like the pancreas. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great.
So there's three main effects that endocrine disrupting compounds have. You can read about them here. So one is that they mimic hormones, causing a chemical imbalance. Two, bind to receptors like estrogen receptors, for instance, in the case of BPAs, and then more or less alter the body's response. Or three, alter production completely, for example, altering liver metabolism of various hormone endocrine disrupting compounds. You can go to this website, the NIH website, and you can read up on all these different facts, none of which are that interesting necessarily on their own.
Yeah, the way I like to think about this is that endocrine disruptors are kind of like a key that fits into a lock that it shouldn't fit into. So the hormones are what your body naturally produces, but these xenohormones are not produced by your body, but they can kind of fit into the hormone receptors that are in your cells all over your body. And we kind of think of only certain parts of our bodies responding to hormones, like the sex organs, for instance, but that's not true. You have hormone receptors in almost every cell in your body.
All right, so this is the kind of main idea behind this project, that we have this realization about just how pervasive endocrine disruptors are, whether it's in our waterways, in our food systems, just more or less in our day-to-day lives. You can see a lot of labeling has BPA free on them. BPAs are probably the most common type of endocrine disruptor second most common that you would hear about in the news media. And they're super common in plastic water bottles, which in a country like Mexico is not insignificant.
Oh, so we should mention that BPA is not the only phthalate that is an endocrine disruptor. So many other plastics also have EDC properties, but they have not been regulated. BPA has been banned in a number of plastic objects, but the other plastics have not been banned, in part because the plastic industry is a hard lobby.
And this all seems kind of boring, but it's the lead up to what's actually important. So don't worry, just sit back and it'll be all good. So these are the two different types of things that we're really into, xenoestrogens and phytoestrogens. So xenoestrogens are a type of xenohormone that imitates estrogen, synthetic or natural. So phytoestrogens, they're dietary estrogens that are naturally occurring and found in plants, soy, sesame, et cetera, et cetera. All phytoestrogens can fit into the xenoestrogen category, but not vice versa. So it's kind of an important thing to know.
These are the big xenoestrogens that are considered the most harmful to the human body. You see BPA again, dioxin, atrazine, which we'll talk about again in a second, phthalates, which is a component of plastic production, perchlorate, fire retardants, lead, arsenic, mercury, PFCs, organophosphate, pesticides, which we'll talk about again in a second, and glycol esters, which is another component of plastic production. And again, there's this website, the environmentalworkinggroup.org. You can read a lot more about EDCs.
They're a little biased though, so beware. All right, so this is starting to get into the stuff that I'm super into. So natural foods can contain phytoestrogens and xenoestrogens, both being hormone mimicking compounds. The one that I find the most fascinating is this one called atrazine. Atrazine is a herbicide that's used in a number of countries, but most notably in the United States and quite a bit in Mexico, and especially used in corn production. Atrazine was found to be creating, I'm going to use the terminology of the medical journals, and I don't necessarily agree with this terminology, but creating the conditions for the development of intersex frogs. Tyrone Hayes was a researcher working for the company that was developing atrazine, and was the researcher that kind of realized that this property existed. And as a result, Tyrone Hayes went through almost a decade of profound marginalization himself, attacks on him personally about every element of his being, and also pushback against his credibility as a researcher. He ended up going on to work at Berkeley University, so all was well that ends well. However, atrazine is probably the endocrine disrupting compound that is most common, other than BPAs, in the American food system.
So this is something that some of you may have heard before, particularly Americans in the audience, that estrogen and water waste is from birth control pill proliferation. So in short, that women who are using birth control pills, hormonal birth control, their urine is being filtered into the groundwater and making its way into the drinking water supply of communities, and then the communities are consuming these estrogens from the drinking water. It turns out that this is actually a sort of misogynist lie. Most of the, not sort of, actually, most of the estrogens that occur in the groundwater and thus the drinking water actually come from agricultural runoff, notably the atrazine that we mentioned earlier.
There's a number of other sources other than just atrazine and stuff, like fracking, which is much maligned, as it so should be, which is an oil extraction technique, very common in the United States, produces an immense amount of endocrine disrupting compounds, as does the tar sands in my home province of Alberta, Canada. No, don't cheer those damn tar sands. You can cheer Alberta, especially if it's the Calgary Flames, but we won't talk about hockey right now. Let's talk about atrazine instead. We can talk about hockey if you want afterwards. So what is most fascinating possibly about atrazine, and to me at least, and I think Liz shares this sentiment, is this is a map that shows the estimated atrazine use throughout the United States. So if you notice this middle America region, and if
By the way, this is the low estimate.
The low estimate, yeah. And if you know anything about American politics, these are the fine people that brought you the orange president. So what's super fascinating is that in a weird way, this middle America region is creating the very conditions to produce effects that they politically do not agree with. So by that I mean, if you think about, and I'll use the term again, very aware, in a very aware way, intersex frogs. If that research actually, could carry into human bodies, they're setting up this really interesting cultural condition. So their politics around capitalist pursuit are in direct negation of their biopolitical politic.
So now we can start talking about our projects now that we've given you the sort of accelerating course on endocrinology. So the first project where we really started working together to try to make a food product around endocrine disruptors was a project called Down-Home Molecular Gastronomy. And we had this idea that I was really fascinated with food, and in particular, the kind of food that was being presented to the public as art. So specifically this molecular gastronomy, which is basically food that's been chemically and physically altered to resemble and texturally and visually resemble something else than what it would naturally look like. So it's all of these things like spherification and foams and mists and stuff. So we thought it would be interesting to use some of the techniques of molecular gastronomy to make a dish that was using the ingredients that were available to sort of vernacular cook in Middle America that would be using the kind of ingredients that might be tainted with EDC substances such as atropine.
So we'll show you the recipe now. Cheesy taco bake, especially this like deconstructed down home molecular gastronomy cheesy taco bake, is absolutely horrifying to eat. You can totally make it, and it's kind of like actually enjoyable to do. But if you look at the ingredients, every one of these ingredients was chosen specifically for proven levels or high levels of endocrine disrupting compounds. So especially like, soy is a very common one, but especially when you look up in like the conventional ground beef, that means it's not like free range or organic or anything like that.
Right, so like beef is a really good one because, for instance, a lot of beef in the US is fed on a steady diet of corn and soybeans. So both the corn and the soybeans probably, as they were grown and raised, were treated with some kind of EDC pesticide or herbicide. And then the cow itself may have been treated with hormones in order to make it grow faster or gain weight faster or something like this. So ground beef in particular is like, it's kind of multiple angles of the EDCs.
We should probably pick up the pace a little.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting worried. I'm looking at that
Where
right
to
now.
help?
All right, so after we had been working on this a little bit, we started to think about food delivery systems in the United States, and especially these meal kit delivery systems that are becoming very common. So does everybody know about like Blue Apron or HelloFresh? So more or less they're companies where they'll send you pre-packaged, pre-measured, like high quality, like oftentimes organic ingredients with a recipe inside, and they'll deliver them to your house like X amount of times a week. So that like you can make these fresh meals, but very quickly and very efficiently.
Because
also at great expense.
You don't have to do any of the prep work. So basically you get this cardboard box delivered to your house and you open it, and it has some foam insulation, it has some ice packs in it, and then every single ingredient is separately packaged. So if you need a single bay leaf to make a soup, a single bay leaf will be wrapped in a plastic bag.
Yeah. So we got the idea of why don't we make Blue Apron for biotechnical resistance? And this is really where we'll get into the project more.
Right. So there's also the Blue Apron model is based on, you don't have to go to the grocery store. Instead, the exact kind of food that you want to eat will be delivered to your door. So if you're vegan, you can order a vegan one. If you're paleo, you can get the paleo one, etc.
So here's a prototype of one of our boxes. Within our boxes, we're not just including like high EDC like content food and recipes, but we're also going to include some DIY science like tools, specifically something called solid phase extraction, so that you can like detect and test for endocrine disrupting compounds in the foods and water systems that like you're using. Then you can send back a little filter that will now house these like endocrine disruptors, and we'll be able to test them for their actual like concentrations using something called an ELISA assay. And again, we've got 5 minutes left. All right. So something really vital to this was, if you don't mind chiming in really quick here, is the kitchen as a laboratory and the laboratory as a kitchen. And the crossover between those two spaces, both being highly gendered, but also profoundly similar.
Yeah, so we're interested in how both the kitchen and the lab are sites of experimentation, but also of production. So we think of the lab in particular as being a space where people experiment, but it's also a place where the products that you consume are originated and produced. And it's the same thing with the kitchen. The kitchen is a space where the products that you eventually consume are produced. So these images that you see on the right, sorry, got a little loud there. These images that you see on the right are our prototype ads for our service that we're going to produce.
So this is, we'll blast through these ones here, but I'll just read the copy here. Cooking Sex is a new kind of meal kit delivery service. We carefully construct recipes with ingredients that have known endocrine altering properties. Each meal kit box contains everything you need to cook your own hormone hacking meal, accompanied by scientific research about each of the endocrine disrupting ingredients and equipment that allows you to gather samples of the ingredients for testing in our lab. Send your samples back to us for testing in our lab, and we'll let you know how your food might be changing you. We also include relevant scientific publications related to the endocrine altering properties of the ingredients. Cool.
So you can learn more.
Yes, very important. We only have like one.
So We have 4 minutes.
Oh,
So, part of what we did was look carefully at how, companies like Blue Apron had constructed their product. So I'm really interested in how products are constructed and designed and deployed. And Blue Apron was a really interesting example because nothing like this had really ever existed before. Now, of course, there's a lot of emulators, but no one had really done this, like, we're gonna send you all your food in a box. Like, that was unknown. And so they really, when they did their initial advertising, they really had to explain the whole process to people. And I thought it was really interesting to look, there's so few products like that where something is presented to an audience that literally has no clue what it is or how to use it. And the advertising itself has to explain to people why they need this thing. So these are additional ads, and these images are pictures from both our lab testing forays and from on the right you see that I'm like chopping up some hops for an endocrine altering meal that I produced.
and just a little plug, if you want to see more of this in Toronto right now, thanks to Roberta and Dalila, you can see our work alongside some other excellent artists that are in the audience. We'll give you more details. Anytime.
Yeah, so these are additional, even more additional recipes, and I'll show you. This is the testing array, and Byron can talk about this a little bit.
Sure. So this is some of the testing equipment. Do you want to go to the next slide if you don't mind? Just because I think it'll make a little bit more sense. So really important to us was creating an actual kitchen lab hybrid performance space that we can bring around with us. 2 different venues. So if you know of any places in North America especially that want a good gallery show, we've got you covered. So we've got this hybrid kitchen lab that actually a fully functional laboratory space, but kind of draws on the aesthetics of both. So yeah.
And if you see, there's our advertisements are hanging in the background. The meal kit box is on the table there, and then the window in the back. Behind that window, you can't see it very well in this image, but there's an image as though you're looking out into a field full of atrazine-treated corn. But you can't see the atrazine. The atrazine is inferred.
Yeah, it's implied for sure. And then this is just a close-up image of the solid phase extraction system to separate suspended compounds according to their physical and chemical properties. This is how you do it. If you're really interested in doing it, I'm happy to send you some of the equipment to do so if you just want to test your own water. And then on the next slide is the piece of the tool that we use called the ELISA assay to actually test for concentrations. So if you felt like extracting some endocrine-disrupting compounds, specifically estrogenic compounds from your food or water, let me know. We'll send you a kit, and then I can tell you what the concentration is with the ELISA assay. The reason that we don't send people the ELISA assay is it's about $700 per 100 wells that you test. So it's not exactly viable for most DIY folks.
So just really fast, this is as we were preparing and researching for the production of the Cooking Stacks meal kit box, we did some testing of commercially available products from just conventional grocery stores. And one of the tests that we did was a variety of waters. And these are our test results using the ELISA assay for the water. So as you can see, some of the Wegmans is a regional grocery store chain. Their in-store brand of flavored water was positive for EDCs, and so was the Whole Foods Just Water. So apparently not just water. So we're also interested in looking at how the packaging and presentation of produced foods is gendered, specifically Slim Fast, which is obviously marketed at women, and Soylent, which is primarily marketed at men in the tech industry, and this company called Moon Dust, which is marketed at people who like Gwyneth Paltrow. That's right. Yeah, thank you so much. These are all the ways that you can get a hold of us. We are posting lots of stuff on our Instagram these days, the Epicurean Endocrinology Instagram, and we also have a new Twitter that's @CookingSex, and a variety of websites.
And pretty soon you'll be able to sign up at Cooking Sets Biz, right, Liz? Should we say this?
Yeah, so.
Pretty soon we'll let you stop.
This is our big announcement. So we are doing a demo version of the meal kit boxes, and we'll have about 25 to 30 test subjects, our beta test subjects, and we'll send the box out to them. Unfortunately, you kind of have to be in North America because we need everyone to send us back their test samples for us to run the tests in our lab. So the idea is that we give you this box, you take some samples, you send them back to us, and we tell you whether you're consuming endocrine disruptors or not.
So please sign up if you're interested at GetIS, and we'll get you more information on how to do that. And with that, check us out on social media. Thank you very much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Luis. We will be moving forward with my face of Ed Solberg and John Hansen. If someone can help me to. Marta?
Not the table, just
Okay.
Thank you.
Want
to show a film first and then do a small film on the table. Everything is sent to
I see you, Adam. I still have the microphone, so.
you didn't just put it under or something.
It's okay, it's okay.
Who wants to stand?
I like to just leave the mic as it is during the call.
Yes, and I can the mic, I don't know what ya lo encontré, Tadeo. Okay. Let the light be on.
Si podemos dejar las luces prendidas.
The light can be on, yes, it's okay. Thank you. And there is sound.
Oh, ouch.
Okay. Let me see how this works. So, hvordan skal vi få på det her bildet? Slide one.
Can somebody help us with which,
We want to show the pictures after one. Okay. Let's see.
so that it's like,
No, we have all the slides, they should come in a line, but we're just separate. But you see, that's what we show, number 3 is the next one, and then 4. Okay. Thank you.
which one?
Our old friend, Torsk, Dolski in Sami, Tara, the snowfish in Japanese, Gallus morhua in Latin, also known as the cod or scralings by the Vikings, or simply the world famous bacalao.
So hello everyone, I'm Trond Amsten. I come from south of Norway. And after my studies in Germany, where I studied visual arts, before I studied biology, and this then brought me in the end to the city of Tromsø in northern Norway. And this was not random because I have been doing expeditions in the polar circular region for a long time. As I'm very much into hunting, fishing, and gathering, I've been doing expeditions up there for like up to a month at a time, where kind of the core key is to sustain yourself from nature through the harvest. So this is elements I cannot really distinguish kind of the hunter, the artist, and the biology in myself, so it all comes together. And my expressions in the arts is one direction is film works, which is an example of here in the introduction, where I kind of work with nature as in the form of visual poems through the films. Then I'm also working with biology and especially microbiology. And I have this big project called Devil's Apron, where we are investigating seaweed and algae. And in this, we're trying to innovate a new alcoholic beverage from the algae. In this project, the Tara Mahua project, is also about searching new potential within nature. And here, the choice of art is the cod, which has been the most important in art.
Yeah. And I am Marita. I am a visual artist and a musician coming from a small valley up in the north of Norway called Mandal. And you probably heard about Samis that are reindeer herders. But I am a sea Sami, and I grew up with small-scale farming and hunting and gathering and fishing in the lakes and the ocean. So there are different Samis up there. So my works is mainly these days around performance art and installation. And I focus my work on finding the place to communicate together, exchange this energy, being present in the space with these objects I use. And cod has always been very important to me, and this project with Trond Amsten kind of gathers everything of the magic from traditions, the magic from the nature, and also like going into the unity of things, like the cod. Everybody knows bacalao. Yes.
Practical, but can you hear us in the back there when we are speaking?
Yes.
Okay, very good. A brief history of the cod, or the bacalao. It has always been the most important fish on the Norwegian coastline. And during the time of the Vikings, it grew enormously in importance because then they developed for first time in large scale the stockfish, or the dried cod. This was a perfect product for their long voyages, as it is conservated already. It is extremely nutritious, and it's light, so you can stock a lot in your boat. It also contains a lot of vitamins, which kept the Vikings from this vitamin lack when they combined it with seaweed as well, though, so it was a good trick. But anyway, that was the introduction to the rest of the world with the bacalao. So it got known, and the interest for it increased so much that during the time of the Viking era, the bacalao, the cod, was the one export article from Norway. It's the most important thing that we exported. Then, unluckily, we were like very bad hit by the Black Plague up in Norway. 2/3 of our country were wiped out, and we had to join a nation with with Denmark. And they were very good friends with Germany. And the Germans then got in control of the whole bacalao stockfish market. So, which made the farmers and fishermen up in the north to kind of peasants. But luckily then, in 1782, there was a guy called Hans Olsen Schønning. My great-grandpa, he was. He had a small fishing trade place up in the north, and he managed to find a new product from waste of the bacalao, of the stockfish industry. And most likely it was cod flour. We're not completely sure, but anyway, with this product, he managed to break the German monopoly on fish trading from the north. Started trading into England, and then he started trading especially with the South states in the US and Latin America. Because this was the perfect product for feeding the slaves. It was cheap and extremely nutritious. Then a major change in the fishery happened in the mid-19th century when trolling was introduced, changing radically. This kind of formed a threat to the small fisherman. Yeah, nowadays we have kind of a big contradiction up in the north, because on the one hand, the bacalao, the cod stock has never been greater, as far as we know at least. It's a very high, good, healthy population.
With the traveling cod.
Yeah, with the traveling cod, there is a different story with the second fjord cod, which is not so well safe. But on the other hand, we now have the big trawling ships, which is like.
Oh, 5 minutes left. Okay, so we better continue.
Yeah.
The big trawling ships, yeah? Gathering the fish, and they don't go into the fjords. So they take all the fish, send it to China, and then return them finished, packed, and send it to all of you guys everywhere around the world.
Yeah. Then we have the coastal uprise, so-called, which is an artist-driven uprise to kind of, yeah, negotiate this problem.
Yeah.
No,
and we don't have good, like the regular cod. You tell about the regular cod. There are less and less because
I think
of
we
the,
shall move to the visual stuff.
Okay.
So now we're going to take you through a short visual journey in our project, where we are combining.
Just go to next.
Where we're combining performance art, video, and installations.
Yeah. And the thing is that we try to use the cod as like this big thing, you know, the symbol of everything. So we go into the old traditions, and also working with alchemic sort of ideas, the magic in itself, and try to use everything on the cod. So the cod becomes this sort of very valuable gem, and we try to find all those small little things The scene here, the performance you saw, is actually this otoliths inside the ears of the cod. That's maybe Trond, we want a picture of the otoliths now on screen, maybe, and maybe Trond can tell you.
I can find that picture, I think.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otolith, bare fortell om otolith.
Well, there is various parts of the cod that we're investigating then. One part is the otolith that was introduced here in the first place, or more popular called the ear stone of the fish. And that is small limestones, which is positioned in small liquid chambers beside the brain. They pick up the vibration in the water, in the ocean, and make the fish capable of hearing, much like our hearing system. But what is really interesting, they are also the black box of the fish, like an airplane. Because if you cut this tube and grind it, you will see the year rings. You can then count how old the fish was, how strong it has been growing. You will also see the temperature of the water. If you analyze it furthermore, you will see the salinity and also the pollution of the water it was growing. So this is like everything stored
In
the
one
otolith.
Yeah. And that's magic.
That's magic. I started. I've always been fishing, and I found it then so ashamed that after I'd eaten the fish, it's all gone. So I started collecting these otoliths from when I was very small, and so they are like kind of treasures also in our project.
Yes. We go through some pictures here and just look at some performances and installations we have been doing, working with the cod in different ways. So here's one of the cameras. If you want to still see it, så ser du.
Yeah, this is.
Answers. Here we are on the ice fishing cod.
Yeah, so this is our local fishing ground, and as we don't have a boat ourselves, we are very fond of fishing on the fjord ice. This is, yeah.
We just go fast. We have only 5 minutes.
What is that image with the last one? What is the last image?
The last we saw.
This one?
The big.
The face with the pieces of the cod.
Yeah, that is the end product of one performance of us.
That's all the parts of the cod sort of.
Yeah, like the caviar, the liver, everything. Yeah. In the performances, it's often like we have little 2 roles. I'm kind of the slaughterer and scientist who is cutting out all these pieces, investigating like the inner guts, the liver, the stones, the skin, all of it. And Marita is like the alchemist transforming this throughout the performance. Yeah, you saw her sewing on like the inner eye of the codfish to her arms. Actually, she made the audience sew it onto her arm, which was pretty intense.
I'm sorry, we're out of time, so if you could just wrap it up briefly.
It's over?
It's over.
Yeah. Okay, can we end with a small thing? Just 2 minutes. Is that okay? Okay. Hvor filmen? Den her.
You could do it in a minute, just wrap it up briefly.
Yeah, we are finished. No, that's beautiful. Okay. Thank you for listening, and we'll show you the last little short film. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Morita and John. If we can have the people who gave talk here at the front, we can have 5 minutes of questions, 10 minutes maybe. I think we can have 2 minutes because there was someone who didn't came. So if there is any questions.
Hi, and thanks to all of you for your wonderful presentations. I have a provocative question for Vladimir. Well, I have a question for all of you, but I start from this one. As I recently read an article about the potential use of VR in studying and researching areas that are ethically not acceptable because of the involvement of human subjects, namely pedophilia, which is the article was published on The Guardian last year. I can look it up and then send it to you. The point of the article was that pedophilia, for example, or other sexual tendencies that are considered outrageous and unethical is still little researched because nobody wants to do real research with pedophiles. And the article, the author was asking whether it would be ethically acceptable and should be encouraged to use VR to do this kind of research. This is a bit, I know this is a bit off topic from your presentation focus, but maybe you can comment on that. If also in your research have encountered any kind of this question and open questions, because for me it was just a huge question which I couldn't tackle myself.
Like what people, how is this topic applied to VR, basically? How like this whole topic applied to virtual reality? Well, as far as I know, it's just the same like regulations. Like if, let's say, I can say, for example, in Japan, that they have really strict censorship, and it doesn't matter what kind of medium people use. Like it could be like comics, or it could be movie, or it could be VR. It's the same regulations. Like, and all different countries have different laws about this. I know, for example, that in Japan it's really, really strict, and all this, let's say, sexual content experiences they have, they have like all the body parts, like genitals are like hidden, and like if you're seeing like even all the porn produced in Japan is like this. And it's the same applies for virtual reality. Like if you're playing all the games, they have all the. It's not even shown anything. Even if you, and I think regarding your topic, it's the same. Like it doesn't matter if it's VR or like if it's a video or if it's a comic. It's the same, yeah, discussion. It doesn't matter what kind of medium it is, I think, as far as I know. Because I only can compare, like, yeah, it's like, I only can compare, like, how people censor, like, pornography in different countries. And I think, I mean, it's kind of connected, but I don't know anyone who did a lot of research about this, to be honest.
Thank you.
But I think your question was not, is this currently done? But is it legal?
Okay, now I'm sorry. Well, your question was not, is it legal, but would it be ethical to use these simulations of something that would be unethical if it was a real human subject? So, for instance, to do research about pedophiles. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So what you're saying is that it is in fact illegal to represent pedophilia, but I think that doesn't answer the question. It's whether it would be ethical to use this simulation in VR in order to get some kind of result, like a research result.
Yeah, the fact is that since pedophilia, there was a topic on, but we could apply the same kind of question also to other topics, I guess. I'm sure. But since we can't do research for that because it's ethically unacceptable, then we also can't really deal with that because we don't know how. We don't know what happens in the body and in the mind of a person that has this roaring desire in himself or herself. So should we use this tool in order to gain data or not?
Yeah.
And this question struck me.
I'm curious about I was curious about something similar with your presentation, which is that it seems like the goal of the simulation of virtual reality is some sort of abandonment of the physical corporal body for this like simulation version that can like encompass all of these things that would be impossible because of the laws of physics with like the giantess or the laws of a country, like something that is illegal, for instance. So I'm curious, like, I guess it's a broader version of your question, like, what do you think is the efficacy of this, like, sort of abandonment of the body? Is that good in your mind?
That's a very tricky question. Definitely, I think if you compare virtual reality to other videos like movies, it's like definitely way more immersive, and you could like, well, you feel more there than it would be just, and the same with you could do much more than like with all this VR based. It's just like that you can do much more in virtual reality, which you cannot really do with mediums like video. And well, potentially, I think you can make this research in virtual reality, and it would be more like you could get probably better results if you would compare like to do it with like movies, like with like video. But well, so does it answer your question? I don't know, like what you.
I just want to know what you think of that. So yes, it does.
This is so very interesting. I don't know if you could give someone else the opportunity stop because unfortunately we're running out of time. So I think there's another question over there. Thank you.
I'm really good at asking questions where everybody gets to talk about stuff. So I'm looking at this as like various kinds of altered states, right? One altered state is about chemical hormones that are either in the environment or sort of toxic sludge that gets into us that alters our metabolism. And another is about VR, which is kind of like eye and ear and proprioception, kinetics, and then a little bit of maybe genital coming on altered states. Right? An altered state like alterity, like a tripping, yeah? And also bio art, body art, performance art is all about ritual process, which puts you in an altered state. VR does, chemicals do, hormones do, and so does like inspired body process, right? Magic shit. And it's like ritual processes, and sometimes it's scripted by large cultures, that give us BPA as an altered state, and sometimes it's like DIY, do it yourself, whether it's performance or VR or DIY endocrinology. But like, I'm interested in, strangely, this question is about death. All of these things are about death in some ways. I don't know how VR is, but I think it is. It's about dying and going into the hypersphere or whatever. But like the death and all these, in some ways some of it's volitional and some of it's not. Some of it's like a war machine. So maybe how many people have you killed in VR, We're talking about pedophilia, but he's like, not just you, don't worry, lots of people are killing people every minute right now on VR. But like, sometimes ritual process has sacrifice, and then larger cultures do like insane war machine stuff, and we don't think of that as sacrifice. We think of that as just like hell on earth. But what is the relationship between the altered states that you're implying and the death involved in them? It's a simple question.
Maybe you should
Well, I think ours is mostly just about trying to get some like reconciliation between like industrial or like capitalistic alteration of individual states through like removing body autonomy, but not like overtly doing so, and then using those like various systems of like corporate influence back against itself. So I think ours is just about like negotiating that like complex relationship, and I don't think it's about answering it at all. It's more just like an awareness that we are being altered, and we could like take that power back a little bit. Nobody's going to, of course, but we could. I don't know, is that correct to you? This has a different take.
Let's see what our programs have to say about
Okay, I can try to say something about that, the circle of everything. But this project also is this kind of being one with nature in a way. So what we take, it's not always, we give something back always. So it's this kind of, I don't know, it's a sort of a game in a way, but it's this sort of circle of taking, but you're giving back all the time. So yeah.
That's what I wanted to say. Finding balance.
Death is not the end.
That's true.
Okay, thank you, Marita. I think we have time for just one more question, a really quick and succinct question.
What about control? Losing control in the ritual, the nature, like kind of relinquishing the control to somebody else, or trying to take control of your sexuality. And or maybe losing control because of your reality, because you're like you kept saying that it was weird. So
About losing and taking control, I think it really depends on what you're into. But I think both things could like take place,
Excellent answer. Well, I was thinking a little bit about ritual and our project, and I think that in a way the product is kind of a means of control, and there's also sort of a ritual object, like this process of creating the product, which is talked about so much in industry. Like there's this special alchemical, magical process that you go through of research and then production, and it does kind of like mirror this this like magical process, and in the end you have this talismanic object that can be like distributed and alters people's like mode of being and their affect. That's like, if that's not like magic, it's a total psychological mechanism of control, of course. So I don't know if that's an answer, maybe.
That was nice. Good job.
Control, but that can be about many things. I feel we were talking about me as well, even though you were talking specifically to him. But this control thing of doing performance, work of performance that is sort of maybe a bit ritualistic in a way. I think it's very exciting and I don't know, to see what happens when you actually manage to get in contact with the people that are there. And it doesn't always happen, but when it happens, it's sort of, then you can let things flow. It can just be, living on its own in a way. So that is very, very exciting.
Okay, thank you very much. I think with that we conclude this session. Just about tomorrow's sessions, tomorrow's Congress will be held at the Instituto de Investigaciones Filosóficas at UNAM. The cheapest way to get there is by subway, but the easiest way for those of you who visit from other countries is to get an Uber. You just put the name of the place and it will take you directly to there. It's just one big building, so it will be very easy to get to the place. So thank you very much for your assistance, and thank you very much for your beautiful presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, I have a question. Which panel gonna be here? I mean, the next session? Yes, session B. Okay.
Yeah, it's not even that so they were it's just really interesting that people talk about this, but the one not even knows about
Ya está en la ¿sabes cómo? ¿Tú eres Cecilia o Lorena? ¿Tú eres la maestra? Manuela, ¿estás a ir por qué? ¿Estás a ir por qué? No, primero va John. No tiene lo ideal es que ustedes hagan sus kits. Lo ideal es que lo ideal es que cada quien abra su batch. Entonces, este es 3.2. Y este aquí, de hecho, va a abierta la carpeta. Y entonces, bueno, este es el M4 y este es el PDF. Ya ustedes. Ajá, así es.
Manuela. Ay, la mucho gusto. Ahí está Lorena también. Ay, pues
Manuela, pues están, o sea, excepto el primero, 3.1.
Ya,
Excepto él, todos los demás tienen presentación. Y es haciendo el código. No, cada uno habla la suya. Lo ideal es que ellos lo hagan, pero no necesitas aquí hay fotos. Este es un video como tal que van a estar parando.
Thank you for setting everything up for us.
¿Esto también es video?
Yeah, of course. You Oriana? No, I'm Liz. I was in the last one.
You're welcome.
Oh, thanks.
Y este es PDF. No hay imágenes como tal en PowerPoint. La de ahora,
No, pero
al iniciar la mesa sí estaban acá y después se pasaron todos para acá para que pudieran ver el inicio. Y al final entró cuando se fue allá arriba pasó lo mismo.
I'm going to look on upstairs.
¿Tú hiciste esa performance?
Sí, está está el enlace en la página de Arte Nacional, en Facebook. Ajá. Y gracias por ver. Y si pueden compartir,
En este momento, para que de Lima los vean.
por favorcito. Yo me hago cargo de todas las redes, entonces ando como compartiendo por Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, todo lo que existe.
Claro, está bien. Democraticemos.
Exacto, horizontalizar. Arte, símbolo de más. Sí, exacto. Sale el simbolito, el logotipo A, símbolo de más, C.
Yeah, I was thinking that it's really yeah, you have.
Can you give me your mail? Because we are recording for the future trend. We are we have 9 years, so the next year is 10 years. So we are making materials. So for I can speak with people, and I'm recording also. I can send it to you. Sí, ajá, tanto la de arriba como la de abajo. Ya sé, pero a mí me saca la chamba también.
Sí, no, pero
No, por supuesto, y aparte ese punto lo está manejando. Así que nada más paso la información. Es justo.
Ya digo, ¿qué es lo que comparte? ¿Comparto el video?
Mira, ve las publicaciones, no, en donde está la publicación, post, ajá, ahí está. En publicaciones, la última publicación, la última publicación trae el enlace, digo, este mismo. I'm sending it to you soon, I don't know, the next month. Well,
Yes.
I'm editing.
Yeah, I'm sure you're busy.
Okay, but I sent it.
Oh, great, thank you so much.
You're and your partner are doing the
So what again?
But I'll see you after that.
Maybe I should try to. Yeah, try to go next year. But is there it's like there will be some I'm trying to like I'm still not sure about joining this because like I do a lot of like now there's people
Yeah, we have a lot of students.
I work from home like but the part this year's finally
¿Cómo llegaste aquí? No,
Más que equivocado, no, bueno, sí, está más
mi novio me dice está en Lima.
Creo que trae como 40 segundos de desfase.
Sí, pero entonces lo que pasó sí, es que lo que pasó es que ¿por qué también me pusieron
Por la cancelación.
¿Sabes? Sí, pues porque estaba esperando en otra calle y lo vi después y las citas ahí.
Ya tengo el esquema,
Sí, en el Instituto de Investigaciones.
igual sabes que lo puse a las 9 de la mañana. Igual voy a estar en la noche.
Pero no lo voy a hacer en español, entonces mejor no lo escribo en español. Tomorrow we start at 10 a.m. I can do it. Instituto de Investigaciones Filosóficas. El mapa está en la página web.
¿Cómo vas todo? Lo que necesites. Yo terminé hoy, pero igual estoy esperando esto. Porque esta tasca me pero lo que tenga dentro, tenemos que hacer unos. Entonces
Es que ni siquiera nada. Vosotros son los que los... Sí. Es que habla de... There you are. That's weird. I thought you were upstairs. It's so beautiful without people upstairs.
How are you talking?
John? John.
Okay, I'm Manuel. We met, yeah, 2 days ago. Okay. So, Alpiton, you have no present locomotive images. Is your talk with images or no?
If I'm able to put images,
Yes,
it
of
would be
course.
nice.
But you didn't send it?
I didn't listen until, yeah, unfortunately I didn't realize it. But
So meaning we have exactly 3 minutes to do it. If you have a key, but you could do it from your computer.
that's possible too.
Yeah, but the problem is, if you have a key, it's much better. So we put it like the other one. He was here earlier. When you were here earlier, what did they tell you?
It was.
Is it a PowerPoint? Do you have moving images on it? Because no, usually when you go PowerPoint from key to another desk, it doesn't work. Moving images doesn't work. But maybe you, yes.
I will, if you have no time. I did it earlier and it was perfectly fine. There was a girl here who was in charge of
Or you go through your you put it on your key, and if you go without putting it on the desk, but directly from the laptop or directly from the key.
So, Dalila put John in this panel because he's flying back to Tokyo. He's but he has nothing to do with the project. So you might want to explain to that.
It's not the only
That's like that. That's true. So, but then case it's a little extreme. Okay. What order is he in?
you first. That's why I'm telling you. I'm sorry.
Talk about pressure. And he was upstairs.
Actually, it's my role.
Yes, you're
I'm supposed to do.
Sorry. Luckily, he's a techie guy, so he'll figure it out. I think the best would be to go straight from the computer, don't you?
If there's no cables, so it might be
Okay.
yeah.
And do you have the connection?
I don't have the.
Okay, so forget it. Okay, let's have a look. Okay. It's here.
I just realized my drive is named after this. It has the same name as this one.
Okay, yes.
As the what?
And so,
It would be down under TTT representation.
no. Sí, como un minuto. ¿Está bien?
If not, I can also just, is it okay if I have my laptop just to help me keep going and then I
Just
can talk?
show me where is something moving images, for instance.
Down a little more. So moving.
Okay, I'm just trying to put it. It's working. Okay, no problem. So, as you're starting, okay. No. Okay. So meaning here you will not have more content.
Oh, that's okay. I thought it was only 15, so.
No, it's 15, and after 15 you start counting.
Ah, okay. Cool.
Maybe.
Microphones.
Ah.
You have to hold it. Which makes it so weird with holding it.
I know. It's like, okay, this is a performance.
Good evening, everybody. This is one of the two last panels of the day, and we will have, as for every panel, 4 talks with 5 speakers. And the first one will be John Bromley from,
Scuba University.
Scuba University.
From Tsukuba in Japan. And well, I've been asked to explain that John's talk is a bit different from the other topics we will have tonight, because he's going back to Japan tomorrow.
Tonight.
Tonight, wow, so you were in a hurry. Meaning you are talking about sound art. So it will be a bit different from the other presentations.
Yeah.
The name of the panel is Objectification.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for letting me switch to this panel so that I could talk, and thank you to, I think it's Romero, for offering to make the change. I want to talk a little bit about spatially immersive sound and kind of how it's realized in a way that's maybe different from the way that people generally think about spatialized sound, and sort of the processes that led us to make this system that I'll talk about. Actually, the system is currently on display as part of the Birds on Diamond project in the memorial just across the hallway. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then, yeah, so it's started. So Edgar Varese, he's a kind of composer from the early to mid 20th century. His really preoccupation was trying to spatialize sound through different techniques, orchestral techniques, orchestral personnel, expanding that spatially and trying to kind of compose around space using just standard kind of compositional techniques using scores. But really he was interested in some kind of new technology, new instruments. Eventually it drove him to do kind of early electronic music using tape. But I was going to read a quote real quick from one of his kind of treatises about new instruments and what he really saw as kind of the future for him. So he says, "The new instruments will allow me to write music as I conceive it, taking the place of the linear counterpoint. The movement of sound masses, of shifting planes, will be clearly perceived." So he really thought about being able to command sound in a way, or place sound throughout space as a plane, and have people really be able to understand sound moving through space in this kind of like planar capacity, or really being able to do that. And kind of the closest he ever made it to that was this collaboration that he did with Le Corbusier and Enos Xenakis. So in 1958, the Brussels World's Fair, he created this spring electronic at the Philips Pavilion. So it was architecturally designed actually to be kind of like a stomach. So you can kind of see the stomach shape. Corbusier wanted people to be kind of brought in, digested with the sound and visuals as well, and then kind of let back out into the world, change somehow through this process. And within the space, there were, I think, up to, it's varying accounts, but at least 150 or so speakers that could be manually controlled, and they could direct some sound in this composition throughout the space. So really, he was kind of able to realize this, but only through kind of a space designed for this, and really everything had to be built around just this concept of spatialization. And now there's maybe kind of better ways to achieve this kind of like beams that he was talking about. And this is actually a kind of diagram from this device that I'm using. And it really does allow you to kind of create a narrow beam to project sound where you don't hear the sound until you actually cross the splitting path. It's not so much just emanating from a source in sort of a standard speaker way, but really going along a kind of pathway and actually creating audio sources by reflecting off of them. And this is what this looks like. So it's a parametric speaker, or ultrasonic parametric speaker. It makes use of, this one makes use of 50 small piezoelectric transducers. And in a similar way to like radio, it has a carrier frequency. So the carrier frequency is double human kind of threshold for hearing, up at 40,000 kilohertz or 40,000 hertz. And those waves being modulated are then emitted from these small transducers, and then when they come into contact with some kind of obstruction or object or person or whatever, aside from sort of like the medium of air that it's moving through, the sound will then sort of demodulate and it will become audible. So if I was projecting it up this wall, and depending on the angle that I was doing it, it would appear that the sound is coming from the wall, and sort of, you can play with this in a lot of different ways, as we'll see. And actually, part of the development of this was for research purposes. So this is eventually found its way to the Birdsong Diamond project, but also we, as part of the Birdsong Diamond project, we're working with researchers in behavioral ecology and people interested in the behavior of birds. So we were able to use this to create a device that would allow you to project the sound into nesting areas so that they could see how the birds were reacting, what the kind of behavior was to these novel acoustics, novel kind of things in their territories. So thinking about that, and then also thinking about bird song. This is maybe like similar but not direct because we weren't using the same speaker technology, but part of the research on Birdsong Diamond, or the research related to it, actually kind of the core research that Birdsong Diamond became the sort of public avenue of engagement with this research, is on linguistics and kind of understanding birdsong from a really more minute, more detailed perspective than just simply a bird sings because it's hungry, or a bird sings not because it's hungry. A bird sings because it's either mating or defending its territory or representing that kind of thing. And Charles Taylor, who was the primary investigator on this research, was brought together a team of linguists and physicists and people who are doing computational strategies with language and being able to look at sensor networks within spaces in order to collect many bird songs and be able to analyze them at a level that was kind of far beyond what had been done in the past. So it really I think they're coming to a point where they're starting to recognize kind of the syntactic levels of birdsong. And in this case, so the picture here is of an experiment that we did where we were going into the territory of an individual bird and then projecting in this kind of like fake bush, which is hiding a speaker, different songs and reconstructed songs or randomized songs that we could see how does this bird react to this and how does it deal with kind of something that's either just completely random or has been recreated in a way that makes some kind of syntactic sense. And we actually found that there was a reaction that was more significant than just totally randomized birdsong. But because of this, I guess getting back to the parametric speakers, we started considering their use related to birds and how they could affect the environment in a similar way that we were affecting the environment in the experiments. So one of the very first versions was this sonic sensor network done up in the trees in the UCLA Sculpture Garden in Los Angeles. And it was taking kind of environmental cues, sounds that it was emanating, and then also shifting based on the sounds and the feedback of that. So trying to, again, think about bird behavior from environmental inputs, but also the kind of multifaceted sounds and sonic soundscape that was being generated through the use of these directionalized speakers, actually reflecting them off the leaves of the trees in order to have them come back at the ground, moving based on the wind flowing through the leaves, and this kind of thing. And the project really evolved. So that was, the previous one was way back in 2011. Since then, it's managed to make its way into like immersive spaces. It's added projections, it's added costumes, it's added quite a lot of different aspects. And throughout them, though, the parametric speakers have really stuck by and been one of the main ways of creating this kind of spatialized environment that people could experience birdsong in kind of a different way than they're used to, and try to kind of grapple with that or manage how they're receiving it. And kind of more recent iterations, we've been trying to think of how, well, these speakers were kind of placed in fixed locations and they're always in the same spots. It created a really nice atmosphere. It made you kind of understand that the space is like shifting in certain ways, but how can we kind of really take advantage of the sort of immersive space that we're working in, work with moving the sound around the space in the same way that Edgar Varese was talking about moving these shifting sound planes around and really creating an environment that was spatially aware, using a sort of spatial counterpoint or spatial polyphony, as a lot of people talked about. So we actually just attached speakers to pan-tilt servos, which in a lot of ways it's kind of, if you're used to working with sound, you would think like, well, if I just attach a speaker to a directionalized servo, it's not going to do too much because of the range, but fortunately these parametric speakers are so narrow that you can actually have them project from in a direction that you want them to and control that direction. And here I'll show you this test because so much, but we're able to kind of develop a system that from a computer we can send messages, we can have multiple speakers and have them all behaving, targeting different parts of the room, have the targets behave differently. We were able to make targets not just sort of virtual objects within the space, but also work with tracking human faces or tracking like arbitrary markers in an OptiTrack environment. So attaching all of these tracking systems to to our system, and this is kind of like an early version. It allowed us to really consider a lot of different possibilities for how we want spatial sound and spatialized immersive sound, in this case, to work with immersive spaces that we're working in. That's that again. Which brings us to a memorial. And so in the memorial space, it's quite difficult because you have these columns where we can't mount to the columns. You have a very large echoey room, which also maybe diminishes the effects of spatialization. But we were able to kind of figure out that if we put stations in the center of the space, we could emulate we could use the columns themselves to reflect sound around the room, so use them almost like prisms, use the sort of curvature of the columns to reflect in many different directions depending on where the speakers were located. And actually, as I mentioned before, we could kind of attach where the speakers were looking to a lot of different possibilities, so people or other track points or just animations. In this case, because the behavioral aspect is so important of birds to the project, it made sense to also have the movements of the speakers in addition to the sounds running from simulations of bird behavior. So in this case, you can see the sort of white balls around the screen, and those are moving as a sort of flocking simulation around the space. So there's a virtual flock of birds flying around the memorial space that then the speakers are aiming at. So they're following the flock in a way that's kind of, it's affecting the movement in kind of an interesting way, because I think they're starting to maybe take on the quality of a little bit of a surveillance thing, but in a very almost not quite reverse, but in the capacity of sending sound in that direction. So whereas most like cameras, and actually a good way to look at the pan tilt technology and tracking over time is to look at surveillance cameras and how those have evolved, where they can follow people around just with built-in firmware. In this case, we're projecting sound in different parts of the room and projecting sound at people, which is also kind of comes with its own issues as well. So I was reading, anyway, I can also show you a video of how it's working with the so in this case, they're moving along with the tracking and following them around the space. But I think it's just the start, because there's a lot more you can do and a lot more you can play with in a lot of different spaces, a lot of different environments and contexts. And yeah, I think we're just getting going with this kind of system. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. So now will speak Cecilia Veica. Sorry, Ocharan from Microscopía Electrónica y Aplicaciones en el Perú, and Lorena Piña Piedra, de Pontificia Universidad Católica de Perú también. One each.
Okay, thank you everybody. I'm Lorena and this is Cecilia, and we will talk today about our project, Encaja Insert S versus L. Fit Insert S versus L. Well, we wanted to start this presentation firstly thanking Taboo, Transgression and Transcendence in Art and Science, TTT 2018, the group Art and Science, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, and the Digital Cultural Center, Mexico. I am Lorena Peña, I'm a performance artist, and Cecilia Vica, a new media artist. We are both from Lima, Peru. And we are here to develop the theme of our conference, Encaja, Insert, S versus L, how to decolonize bodies today. We will start by talking about and from our own artistic practice, because it's this previous work that led us and is the seed for our project Encaja Insert. And actually, is one of the reasons, this background work, that we have started working together and start this collaboration. This is why, for us, it's important to explain our background and the basis of this artistic production.
Our research has been developed from our artistic practice and reflection. As we said at the beginning, we are artists, and both Lorena Peña from the performative and Miss Cecilia from the new media, we work in a true co-creation on the border of disciplines, where each one nurtures and participates in the practice of the other. However, this way of creating learning leads to and is completed by the feedback received of the spectator participant, without which it would have no meaning.
I'm an artist that research, explore, and creates performance art pieces within the themes of body, gender, and identity politics. I use always an autobiographical approach. The core of my work is derived from personal me, very personal. I firmly believe that the personal is political, and my research travels between the liminalities of physical theater, body art, multimedia performance, interactive and participatory digital performance. I understand video, sound, technology as an extension of the body experience and a projection of the body, the self, and its intersubjective relationship with the others. Here are three of my projects. Well, there were three of my projects in which I have started working around multimedia, interactive installation, and video mapping. My direct and background project is called Anatomical Cartography. This is a piece I developed where the spectator becomes a participant and is instructed to act on the performer's body. It's an interactive human map that is offered to the audience to intervene as a body and a territory.
In my case, I am a new media artist. Technology for me already has a discourse. It is procedures, ways of doing, and therefore it is identity. Any device implies a need that has generated. My work talks about revelation through technology, with different device, projections, installations, and applications created ex professo. I try to show either a procedure, a behavior, an information that happens in front of our eyes, but which we do not perceive. It is with this device that I exaggerate, accentuate, emphasize, and sometimes I try to correct something that disturbs me. I would call it a poetic of revelation. In them, the programming controls the speech, resulting in non-linear pieces with modularity, automation, and variability. The work is an object that does not exist as unique, but as infinite versions really like ourselves. Well, here there are four works that I come from interaction. First, I did installations in interactive installations. But all of these works have this path between them that for me the most important is to rebuild this process or systems that are behind. No, because of that is for me so important this sentence of Paul Preciado. But the direct antecedent is Versión Remota. In that work, this is the first time I work with a performer. I was interested from the movement and the quantification of the movement. I started trying to work with a body with historia, history, and also with the control of its movements. And in that case, I work with Mario Pereira, a performer from Bolivia.
So in both of our previous projects, we already present kind of interest in gender stereotypes, relationship with the body, quantification, relationship with technology, social systems, and all of this led us to Data Insert. We will show a very short teaser of the piece for people that were not able to see it at Casa Viva last Friday.
Bienvenido participante al juego Encaja Insert S versus L. El cuerpo de antes pesaba 106 kilos y tenía una obesidad del tipo 2. Padecía de un trastorno alimenticio llamado TAC, trastorno de alimentación compulsiva, que consiste en periodos de ingestión excesiva de comida, pero los padecientes no se provocan el vómito para purgar lo comido. Luego de un episodio de atracón o ataque, sienten culpa y disgusto hacia sí mismos. El cuerpo de después se realizó una intervención de manga gástrica, que consiste en darle al estómago la forma de una manga o tubo y al mismo tiempo disminuir su tamaño en aproximadamente un 85 a 70%. Bienvenido participante al nivel 1. Escoge entre mi cuerpo de antes o mi cuerpo de después. Ingresa al área designada para el juego y colócate sobre una de las dos marcas.
Thank you. So the project. The conquest of America begins with the conquest of bodies. Pre-Columbian rituals require a re-education in accordance with the modern foreign values that landed in the New World. And therefore, the creation of renewed corporal disciplines supported by devices of submission. Renewed because the body finds cracks, lines of escape, devices that will and have expired. Raúl Garcia. Historically, colonization has implied the occupation of a territory by a group of believers itself superior, and denied, expelled, annihilated, and subjugated those who lived there before. This modern idea of union, neoliberal, activate new conceptual colonizations. María del Carmen Vicencio.
And our hypothesis about our project is that colonization begins with the internal betrayal of our own ideas. Grassroots thoughts that we consider to be natural or tactic, and that become in cultural and social practices, ideas open the door to similar ideas. They are the Malinche, the Filipillo, that open the door to the next colonization. The first is not over, and the new one is hooked on this retrofitting.
And what is the betrayal? The betrayal of our own body, of this appearance that we try to erase, the betrayal of the operation. I cannot control myself. I try to follow the instructions, but I will always lose in this perverse game, in this anxiety of normality. I'm not normal. I'm not white. I'm not thin. I do not work. It is then the machine, the body, and its software which fails.
The new colonization has an effective camouflage tool of this system that become tacit. By dint of repetitive advertising mechanisms, we end up understanding that we should not be the way we are, but that we should be like others. There is an appropriation of foreign aesthetics that seek to eliminate differences. This tendency includes the massification and movement towards small armies of uniformed citizens, where what is sought is to follow a pattern or a model typified by me. Andrés Gaitán Tobar. So we believe that a way of decolonizing is play and technology, sometimes. Technology will reveal these mechanisms and make them evident through a performative game in Encaja Insert. Humor, interactivity, participation of public, and performance. We use the artifact against the artifact itself. We use Western hegemonic languages and resources to evidence them, question them, and re-signify them. Ideas against ideas, system strategies of decolonization.
Well, Encaja Insert, S versus L, is a perverse and playful game that uses the banal as way to confront us with a theme what we consider of survival, that's a social aesthetic mandate of the hegemonic and commercialized image of Western woman. We think that the game is as an interface. The game is an interface and concept at the same time. Encaja Insert, in a technical way, is an interactive digital performance which we have called a performative game, because somehow the participant and the spectator play a role in this scene of trying to fit into the Western beauty canons. With a playful strategy of reappropriation and syncretism, we decolonize our own body territory discourse while playing. The operative, we use an application created ex-professor, which through a Kinect sensor allows the interaction of the participant and control the video of the performer before and after her operation to lose weight that are projected on herself, over herself. The spectator is a player participant invited to choose between the body of before or the body of after. Then you should try to fit the body of your choice with the real-life body of the performer.
This is a game fight between bodies to fit and unfit. As the participant must maintain its preference with determination and ferocity. The game is divided into 3 levels of 1 participation at a time. So the game works because we have turned the floor into a game area that is marked to divide the world between 2 sides, binary. The life and the participants, as well as the performers, in this binary cutting way, 2 sides, 2 lines, 1 line. So the dividing line, the bodies and the measures. Here, there is a conflict
that those gender technologies that are exceeded, breasts too big, lips too big, women must be thin and have to have tits to be recognized as a woman, but the excess of either of these two things is punished. The line, in both senses. Keep the line and do not cross the line. Thus, the anorexics are those who have not found the measure. They are the mad ones who have done the same as all of them, but they have gone out of hand. Nagor Iturrios. So the territory to decolonize is the body itself. And it's not only one body, it's all of our bodies. This set of versions of ourselves that we inhabit, immersed in our experiences, influenced by the imposed systems of colonization, of aesthetics and Western hegemonic culture.
And the instructions, our internal programming, in a scenario of not fiction, impossible instructions are dictated to us. A firm voice overtells us these detailed rules, mixed with information about eating disorders and some testimonies from the performer about eating disorders and her gastric slave operation. The interaction is the ace of loose on sabotage. You have failed repeatedly. Come on, move, try again, fit it, come and fit it. Give me the body of your preference. Give me the body of your preference. This is a fragment of instructions in the voice of the performer. The interaction is of loss and sabotage, where always the chosen body will be S small. The thin body, aesthetically globalized, in some way it is a struggle to decolonize and colonize, which alternate again and again.
We also visualize a real subject, a flesh plane that invites and provokes another flesh. The performer puts the body, which, being so hers, represents every woman. The autobiographical performance is driven by a political potential, and it can be variously an act of invention, intervention, answer, revelation. It could allow the new knowledge about the relationship between experience and power struggles. Deirdre Hedon.
And finally, there is another participant that is the spectator. When we do this performance, at one point it's like a Roman circus, where these spectators also are part of this performance.
It is like a competition, but with a bait, and it has different levels. One of them is the voyeur, the one that looks at the game. And all of us fail together in this programmed game to fail, like society. Thank you very much.
Cecilia and Rowena. We are now going to listen to Boriana Rosa Dragoreva.
It's me.
It's me. Welcome.
Yeah.
From Syracuse University in US and Bulgaria.
Can I attach my computer? I was told that I didn't do that. Yes, do you have the plug?
Just type it. You have better HTML.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. But if it is HDMI, then there shouldn't be any problem.
Es un escándalo que nos ha generado el español en México. Pero no es por eso, no podemos do I need, where is my microphone?
You have a
This
microphone in here. Yes.
This one? Okay.
Yes. Anyone.
Hi. Let me just move. I think I'm going to move a little bit around. So I need a little space. Okay. So I'm going to talk about one of my works that I did. 2004. It is a very old performance, like maybe 14 years ago. I made it, but I think it actually obtained a very different meaning now, or different political. It is making a different political statement because of the changes in the political environment, specifically in Europe and in Bulgaria. I'm from Bulgaria, but all over the world as well, because we are witnessing this very conservative wave that is coming in politics, but in the cultural life as well. So this performance is called The Last Vow, and subtitle, the Great Revolution of the Species, is just for these purposes. It's not part of the title of it. What I did in it is, I don't know why it looks so stretched, this image. If it is possible to somehow change it.
I'm going to ask him to change
Yeah, if they can do this, it would be great.
Sí, pero is it better for you?
Or sure. Or it is getting out of it. Yeah, maybe this is, I think this is better. I'm trying to imagine what is up now. But anyway, so what is happening here is that I'm stitching up my vulva with a surgical thread. And by that, I'm closing the last valve before the explosion of the revolution of the species. This is a performance which I made together with a collective which is called Ultra Futuro, and this is a collective that I have established together with my partner, Oleg Mavromaki, who is a Russian artist, but we work together across the world, in Bulgaria and now in the United States. And it was illustrating, or it was making a visual and performative and body gesture to support one of the statements in the Ultra Futuro manifesto, which was back then in 2004, we would say that we would like to overcome gender. In Bulgarian and in Russian, this makes sense. In English, doesn't really make sense to say that I'm going to overcome gender. But basically, it was about overcoming gender hostilities or hatred based on the fact that we have bodies that are different and they perform differently, and they have all these social constructs that are applied to them. Nowadays, when I talk about overcoming gender, it actually starts to make more sense in English, even in English, and I will explain a little bit later why. So how is this? It is related, it is a technological performance, and not because there is a participation of technology in it. There is participation. There is a sensor that is taking my what is happening with my body, and there is a visualization and a sound that comes from this, but this was not important at all. It was just like a beautification of the piece. The most important thing is that it was conceptually related to the idea that we as people who develop technology are capable already of creating life in a petri dish or in artificial environments, in biolabs, which is considered to be life, but doesn't actually lacks a lot of the properties that are specific for species, for categorization according to gender or sex, or later like ethnicity, nationality, race. I was very inspired, actually we were very inspired as a collective by research and by artworks made by Tissue Culture and Art Project, which is this collective from Australia, which actually developed the idea of these extended bodies and the species, the new type of species that are not, we are not able to put in a category according to the taxonomies that are typical for our natural history museums. So this is just an image from Tissue Culture and Art Project from their website. The name of the collective is somewhere up in the black, so just try to remember it. This is a piece by them, which is called No Arc, and which, so it is No Arc, Exit Art 2009. This was a show that I curated, and I included this piece. What it is that in this, the projector here doesn't really reproduce well the colors, but behind these red glasses, there are typical species like birds, some mammals, some other species, and they are put under categories as they are in a natural history museum. And behind the blue window over there, there is a bioreactor in which we see something which is considered to be alive, and it is alive, but it doesn't have any of these categories. It is produced in the biolab within the bioreactor, but it is still, and actually it is a form of life. So we were thinking, once we are producing this type of life, then maybe we can think about it also in terms of giving us a biological example of how to overcome all these categories that are constructed around us after we are born and after we differentiate as certain species, or as certain genders or sex, or as nationalities. So in the name of this new type of life, we decided to make this performance and saying like, we are overcoming gender hostilities, we are overcoming gender, because this is one of the things that really creates a lot of hatred in our world. So that's why this is why I made this piece. And I'm going to show a video at the end of my presentation. But now, so this is, the performance was made in 2004. And back then there were a lot of bad things happening, and that's why we made it. We were like, we don't like people to hate each other. We prefer people to love each other and to be different at the same time. It's not about erasure of any kind of differences, but it is actually overcoming this idea of difference as something that should make us fight with each other. But this is now, and this is in Bulgaria, and this started happening like back in 2004, but was not very recognizable. So it is a neo-Nazi march that exists in Sofia, Bulgaria, for 15 years. And it is celebrating the death of one of our Nazi generals. Bulgaria was an ally of Nazi Germany, who sent a lot of Jews to concentration camps. Anyway, he did a lot of bad things. But we are having these people who are making this march, and they have established something which is called the Nazi International, which sounds a little weird, but this is what is happening. So the Nazi International that comes together in Bulgaria in February every year. Those are parties. There are some groups and parties that are actually forbidden all over Europe, but they are allowed to march on Bulgarian streets, on Sofia streets, and this is how big it is. It is several thousand people. This happens every year for 15 years now. If you ask me questions why, how it happens, it is that the state says, we don't like it, but the mayor should say no or yes, and then there is this bureaucracy going back and forth, and at the end they're just making it because nobody really forces them out of the streets. So I just wanted to, like, after having this blackness here, to have something nice and red, to just dissolve it a little bit, because then I'm going to something, also not so very nice. Those are current events, within which this piece actually gets a very different meaning. The Council of Europe actually accepted document which is for prevention of violence against women and children. It is called the Istanbul Convention, and it was a document that was supposed to be accepted by all the countries in European Union to create legislation and educational to support educational efforts, according to which or within which schools would teach kids, about non-traditional gender roles, which means that women are not necessarily and always supposed to be having kids and sit next to in the kitchen. So, but what happened is that we had something which I didn't know that it exists worldwide. It is called anti-gender campaign. I don't know if you have ever heard about the anti-gender movement, but it is a movement around the world, and apparently in Bulgaria it actually bloomed in the beginning of this year, and people started talking about anti-gender, and gender became bad word, an offensive word for gay people. So, as opposed to calling you a fag or whatever, or queer, they would call you your gender. So in Bulgaria, this is now an offensive word. And it is because in Bulgaria happened this long campaign against the acceptance of the Istanbul Convention, and this was the first, actually not the first, but the only country in European Union. This is true, yeah, this. The plastic is very fragile now. Yeah, now that we have this. Sorry. Yeah, trying to be more ecological. But anyway, what is happening is what has happened is that Bulgaria didn't accept the convention. This is the only country within the European Union which was against it, and now we have all these. I'm sorry, my voice is not. So they were really scared that when we start to teach children about non-traditional gender roles, we will actually teach the boys to be girls. And so this is how it was interpreted, and this is how it was promoted, and this is why it has been supported by several political parties, including and actually led by these Nazi parties that are present in our government as well. Those are things that they use as a campaign, kind of posters and stickers. Over there, you don't see it, but this is a female teacher with all the stars of the European Union on her t-shirt, teaching the little kids to be gay and to be facts or to be genders. So we will have these little genders that will walk around. This is what people in Bulgaria talk about. So that's why I'm trying to tell you that overcoming gender actually became a saying or became something meaningful. Otherwise, I mean, although it would have been, I'm sorry, it was not very meaningful when I did it in 2004. So these are the same Nazis. They led all these marches that were about prevent our children from being perverted. And so we ended up actually talking about overcoming gender. I'm going to show the piece in a minute. I just wanted to show you something, which is actually the resistance against it. I wanted you to pay attention to this little poster up there, which says, "Misogyny brings you Trump," which I think kind of makes this whole conversation a little bit more global than just European or Bulgarian. The last one, which I think kind of gives another layer of this, because everything is connected, like class, race, gender, ethnicity. All these things, they interact in a certain way, and then they create this politics of oppression. So those are things that we can see now in the Bulgarian streets, which is actually really cool, and we really happy about it. And within this context, which I hope you wouldn't only empathize with, but maybe find some connections with your own local contexts around the world, I want to show the video. And of the piece, which is like 4 minutes, I hope I get enough time. It is an old piece, as I said, so the video is not the most crystal one. I also wanted to, okay, I guess this is really not shown. No. Is it playing? No, it's not playing. Okay, so I'm really stitching up my vulva with a thread and with a needle. So people who don't like things like this, you can close your eyes and just listen to the soundification of this piece, which is a mix between my own voice, people around me, and some kind of a sound that is produced as a feedback or as a reading of my muscle tension. It is almost as if you're actually looking or listening to some visualization of jellyfish stitching up her vagina. It's similar to the things that we have been talking about in the beginning of this conference, because we don't really know what the jellyfish is doing in all these concerts. They might be actually doing something very radical to themselves. So I'm going to play this. You can close your eyes if you want and listen to it, and you can also watch it.
Thank you very much. Next speaker will be Mariana Perez Bobodilla from City University of Hong Kong.
Yes.
And you need
my presentation.
Your presentation.
Hello, everyone. It will be a challenge to speak after this. My name is Mariana Perez Bobadilla. I was born in Mexico City, but now I'm a PhD researcher at the City University of Hong Kong. And today I'm going to speak to you about three of my favorite topics, which are bacteria, feminism, and art. So these seemingly distant concepts come together in art and biology as a form of joyful insurrection. But we will get there. How can art and biology be a form of joyful insurrection? But I first want to start at a familiar place. So we might be familiar for many of you. This is Gilberto Esparza, out of photosynthetic plants. So what we have here is a symbiotic system. So we have these columns with microbial fuel cells that I'm going to explain in a moment. And they are full of wastewater. So what's going on there? No, please don't leave me in the dark. ¿Me prenden la luz? Gracias. So what's going on there is that the bacteria are feeding themselves from this wastewater, and then the energy is held together and brought to make flashes of light to keep a plant that is in the nucleus. I will show you in 1 second. So this is the nucleus. And these flashes that come from the wastewater and the bacteria keep this plant alive because it's a dark room. So as you can see, it's a complex system that holds everything together. Here we have the plants in the nucleus. And I will speak more in detail about the microbial fuel cells. I even brought one with me. So the notion that I want to underscore now about this work is that of the microecosystem, of a symbiotic relationship, and particularly that of microbial ecologies. So for the microbial fuel cells to work, the bacteria have to be together in a mesh that is the biofilm. Also, they all depend on each other. So the bacteria depend on the water, and the plant depends on the bacteria and the microbial fuel cells. And then we have a symbiosis of machine and plants and bacteria working together. So Gilberto is very careful to bring the whole ecosystem. So when we were talking about it, and I was replicating his experiments to understand the work better, he told me, please pick up everything, the mud, the water, don't change everything. Many scientists cultivate and make sure they have pure cultures, but Gilberto instead wants to bring everything. He's not even sure who's there, but he's bringing the whole microbial ecosystems with him into the museum. So with these microbial ecologies, I want to also introduce this other concept that is important to me and I'm trying to develop, and is that of microbiopolitics. So I'm taking it from Heather Paxson from MIT. She's an anthropologist, and she's talking about the way that we should behave or we should understand microbes, but from an anthropocentric way, considering that we know that we are entangled with them in our bodies. Heather Paxson is very anthropocentric, and she's clear about it, as an anthropologist, of course. But what I'm trying to push here is another understanding of microbiopolitics that is really centered in microorganisms. So instead, this presentation is an invitation to think of microbiopolitics and life not centered in humans, but to think the distribution of life, pain, and death from a microbiological point of view, of life and as its minimum condition. So when we speak about biopolitics, we can immediately think of Foucault, but then like the cybernetic revolution came to us, and then microbiome revolution came to us. And that's the way I want to approach the microbiopolitics, how everything is changing from this point of view. So some of the key issues for microbiopolitics are those of collaboration. For example, those of collectivity, and we will see about it in the biofilm. But also this idea of symbiosis, of working together, endosymbiosis, and nature-culture continuum, when it is not clear what is artificial and what is natural when humans are accepted as part of nature. And of course, a post-anthropocentric or post-human turn. So I don't want to go too fast to the post-anthropocentric turn, but first I want to give the due credit to the feminist theorists that brought these thoughts to us. So the post-human comes from many places, but I'm especially interested in the way that it comes from feminist perspectives. So we can consider Donna Haraway. It's a classic text about cybers. So she's working very hard to turn down our traditional vision of gender and of the stereotypes of what women are. As we were discussing a few days ago, women is like a political stance, so we can fight for rights, but it's not very sustainable now in scientific terms. So Donna Haraway is talking about the symbiosis and the continuity with technology and animality of humans, but also very interestingly about finishing dualisms. And this is happening in 1985, just consider how long ago. And now media art theories are taking it into consideration, just a few decades later. I also want to talk about Rosie Baidotti. She talks about the post-human, and let me explain it better before my mom gets upset. This is another key perspective when she departs from arguing from the Vitruvian man. So this Vitruvian man argues that only white, rich male have historically been subjects, they have been human. So this process opens up to include others that were formerly exploited as inferior and other forms of living matter. It also brings up the problem of giving up subjectivity for those who never had it. Another important work from a feminist is Anna Tsing, The Mushroom at the End of the World, where she is considering the entanglement of mushrooms, forests, history, culture, and supply chains. She gives a protagonism and subjectivity to the humble, and literally humble, being close to the earth, mushrooms, as an opportunity to criticize savage accumulation in capitalism. Or also from UC Santa Cruz, Natasha Mayer's work on proteins and plants, and she displaces subjectivity and reinterprets our relationships if we were to focus on plants. So as you can see, these are very particular notions of feminism, quite different to what we have seen so far. So Baidotti, and also departing from Baidotti, to think the process of confronting the thinkability of life that may not have me or any other human at the center. It is actually sobering and is an instructive process. I see this post-anthropocentric shift as a start for ethics of sustainability. What my project is trying to do, a little bit following all of these feminist heroes of mine, is to think similarly, reframing with microorganisms. A microbial post-human as a joyful form of resistance, as a joyful act of insurrection. And it's similar to those that are pointed out in works like Gilberto Sparza's. So the microbial post-human is built on collectively, not individually. And it's a multi-species communities in the form of mesh. It's a tissue. It's a mesh with architecture. So you can imagine that the bacteria organize together. So they have communication and organization. And these characteristics are typically associated with multicellular organisms, where we consider bacteria to be single-cell organisms. So biofilm is very common. We all have it right now in our mouths as a form of plaque, so it's everywhere. And it's also very important because they constitute the energy of microbial fuel cells. That is one of the things that I'm working on these media art projects. So biofilm is important, yes, because they are in microbial fuel cells and in photosynthetic plants, the work I opened for. The biofilm, the bacteria metabolism releases electrons. Just imagine that bacteria is eating and then she's like, I don't need these electrons. We used to think that it was waste, but we have been seeing that it might be a way of communication as well. So it releases the electron working as the mitochondria. So as you know, the mitochondria is like the power plant of the cell. But in this case, the bacteria are like the power plant of the microbial fuel cell. It is a cyborg analogy to what Lynn Margulis calls the endosymbiosis theory. I know many of you are familiar with it, but in case you're not, I will tell you briefly. This theory that is quite widely accepted said that originally the mitochondria that gives energy to most animal cells right now was an independent bacteria that got engulfed, like they eaten but not really eaten, and still they keep an independent genome from that of the nucleus. So this is like the theory of endosymbiosis that is quite accepted right now. So what I'm proposing is that microbial fuel cells have a similar process because they're using bacteria as a source for their energy. Therefore, microbial fuel cells are also a form of artistic research, a media for joyful insurrection, the endosymbiosis and the complexity. So we started talking about intersectionality in the 1980s. For those from the sciences, intersectionality is keeping into consideration, and we're hearing about it in the last talk, is taking into consideration all acts of privilege and disadvantage. So for instance, ethnicity, class, sexual orientation, besides that of gender. So several decades later, after intersectionality through the posthuman, we are wondering what comes after human exceptionalism. So the original feminism was for white women to vote. Then we started to think about white women. Then we started thinking about class. Then we started expanding our notions of privilege and disadvantage. So what happens after human exceptionalism? So that's what I'm thinking now. One of multiple answers is the main goal of this presentation, to imagine a microbial posthuman as the joyful act of insurrection from art and biology. The notion of joyful acts of interaction comes from Rosa Berdoli, related to her invitation to stay critical but also creative. Feminist politics is critical but is also affirmative. It aims at counter-production of alternatives to the present and to the structures of subjectivity. So the tool I'm using to be critical and creative is art. and this is where I'm trying to find my joyful act of insurrection. But how does art operate? In this case, it is a form of material speculation, material thinking, speculative imagination, or what Harvey calls SF. Transdisciplinary work in art and biology can function as material thinking, not only as a demonstration of scientific principles, and today in the morning we were speaking about that, is art and science just a demonstration of scientific principles? Well, I think it also can supplement, and sometimes it is in tension, with scientific thought. Creative alternatives opening the speculation possible, the experiment and effective material experience it can provide. There is a material experience we have with the artworks that we don't have with the text or in science. What can be materially researched by art about nature that cannot be said by any other means? What can we say with art that we cannot say with words? Art and biology becomes a space of possibility to imagine the microbial posthuman. So I'm thinking about speculative imagination. This is Whitehead, new materialism, the feminist, and the SF in Haraway, that stands for many things. It's an open definition. And this situated imagination of possibility is about, now I'm coming back, now we're arriving to the end of my presentation, so I want to open and close with an artwork. So I'm going back to material examples, and this work is called Speculative Speculation. It's by Interspecifics. It's a Latin American art collective you might be familiar with. So the work consists of a DIY microscope that you can see here, and is powered by artificial intelligence to observe and learn from a culture of Bacillus circulans, the species that they're looking at, and the data is then used to produce sound and images. This generates an experience of the phenomenon of machines and microorganisms cognition together, becoming sound and image. The data is fed to an algorithm that starts to learn and recognize the behaviors. So the computer and the algorithm is looking at the bacteria and learning. Then artificial intelligence is given the freedom to generate with the input. So they use a software like Open Frameworks or Super Collider as a continuative generative piece. All the contents are transmitted so that human audience can experience the phenomenon of speculative communications. And what Leslie, the artist, told me is that for her it's very important to have humans' perception expanded so that we are also able to perceive. So the situated imagination of possibility is about the cognition of microbes and machines. So imagining that there's other ways of thinking or relating to the world other than human intelligence. This form of speculation hints to a post-anthropocentric perspective, bringing forth the communication, coordination, and behavioral patterns of Bacillus circulans. As I told you, when bacteria are together, they behave in very interesting ways. And it's because we don't still understand how they communicate, organize, and why some of them sacrifice for the others or take different roles. So this work is like observing and speculating about it. It is a recognition of the cognition of non-humans and the complexity of processes we don't consider because normally we cannot see. These artworks seek to generate critical perspectives towards our relationship with the environment and transform the vision we have of ourselves within it. The biocultural artifact is simultaneously hardware, wetware, and software, as hybrids of science and art that generate space of possibility for an embodied transdiscipline. So right now, we arrived to my conclusions. So I have 4, but only one is important. So as a conclusion, I want to think of a posthuman feminism, critical theory that is environmental, that is ecosystemic. Number 2, art and biology presents a non-anthropocentric understanding of bacteria as interaction within machine-animal systems, symbiosis, entangling matter, meaning, and nature culture. These artworks seek to generate critical perspectives towards the relationship with the environment and transform the vision we have of ourselves within it. As with the telling example, they frame bacteria as active agents, subjects, and a topic. So this is my last conclusion, is the important one, that overall, these examples want to introduce microbial posthuman as a joyful act of insurrection, imagined and materialized in art and biology. Thank you. Thank you, Mariana. May I ask all the speakers to come to the table for the questions? So we have 40 minutes for questions, so we can browse a lot of things. Who wants to start?
Gracias a todas y todos por esas presentaciones. Thank you all. I wanted to start, I have a lot of provocations from these presentations, but I want to start with Cecilia y Lorena. I saw the performance and I see you're decolonizing the body, and I was wondering how you think through the body and sovereignty, questions of sovereignty, and then with these piece where there's binary, and then is there ever another option? For instance, I was filming, if I had been able to be in it, I would have crawled. And I thought, there's options outside this binary for some of us. So what do you think about that and the sovereignty of the body? in a decolonizing context?
Right. Well, of course, there is many options to the binary. We'll start with that. But then, as we were saying on the presentation, we're trying to use the game and technology and the performance as a way of revealing kind of a system that are imposed in most societies. Obviously, there's people that rebel to this, and that we, of course, feel like we are like that. But we try to portray what is not seen by some people, right? So using it as a means of revelation. And well, about the soberanidad o...
Sí, sobre el cuerpo en un contexto de decolonizar y todo eso.
Y con respecto and about that, well, definitely we are, because of the game is programmed in a certain way, although you think you're playing for your own choice. We try to, let me wait. So because of this, we're trying to make the participant, the player, right, think that they are taking a choice and that the performer or the co-player is the one that is constantly revealing. I am rebelling. I am rebelling to the instructions all the time. But then the instructions say to the participant to keep the instructions, to follow the instructions, and then so it's trying to make an embodied thinking, reflection of, right, I'm following, why I'm following, and then what's she doing? She's supposed to be following, and she's not following. So it's in this kind of a fight between following and not following that we think we try to pinpoint the colonization, decolonization of ideas that affect all of our bodies.
And the only thing I can say is, for us, we want this revelation to make a question in ourselves. So we are not doing other path to follow. We think the most important thing is to exaggerate, because when you play, you feel at the beginning comfortable because you are going to play. But I think that all this programming in our brains is like this. You think it's tacit, and you think it's inoffensive, so it's not going to harm you. So in this case, we exaggerate, and the most important is a biographical performance. So if you see there is only two, in a binary way, there are two only choices, before and after, but it's always changing, because this is not true. There is no this line to separate everything. We have a lot of bodies. You can see three bodies there, three Lorenas, but also you can see the participant, and at what point it's like on a stroll, but similar, So it has a lot of levels. We did this project from the guts, and then we reflect at the same time we were working together, But we don't want to make a path to follow or the answer. We want to reveal to everyone the questions.
This is always a question people ask us, and it's always like we are not giving an answer. We are only making a question.
Sí, no parecía que estaban dando ninguna opción ahí.
Lo digo porque siempre nos preguntan como que, ¿y qué significa esto, no? ¿Y qué están diciendo? No, bueno, estamos preguntando. Nos preguntamos nosotros primero. We ask first ourselves, and then we thought, okay, let's just put this out and see what happens. Gracias.
Another question?
I have a question about the sound piece. Is there a specific purpose for having this sort of robotic voice judging whether or not you've got the accuracy of the sound correct?
Actually, it didn't always have, it wasn't always a robotic voice, but it's interesting that you, like, the way you frame it as sort of like it's a judging kind of voice. And in fact, I didn't have the decision about doing that. But I do see that it has kind of like a strange way to be sort of like imitating a biological creature, but then having kind of the computer itself giving are you correct or not, and also forming it into some kind of numerical value. I mean, there's always kind of a problem saying, okay, you got an A on this, on your ability to do this, and I think ultimately it should. I mean, it's taken different forms. There's been like 8 or 9 versions of variations. But really the goal is that you're attempting in some way, and I think part of the percentages, I guess, was a way to maybe gamify it a little bit, to make people want to compete more, try to really put more effort, I guess, into sort of becoming a bird, becoming vocally as much as you could kind of like relate that way.
There was a throwing up to Brianna. I actually wanted to put 1 and 2 together, like because you talked about synthetic or the body without organs or the semi-living, and you talked about your piece, the last valve, and then you talked a lot about social injustice and violence against women, violence against just hate in general, but you didn't necessarily contextualize how the performance related to those issues. It's a rather simple question, because when I read the last valve, it's almost like, close the vulva, stop making children, it's over for humans, and I know that's totally not what you were saying. Right? I mean, so I want to hear what you were saying.
Oh, yeah, okay. I think I can answer this in many different ways, and also the way how this piece have worked over the years for different people. They read it depending on their own biases, and they expose their own hatred, or they react to it with their own hatred, things that they hate the most. This is the position from which they start reacting to it. Like the first reaction I heard was from a very important art historian and critic in Bulgaria, Men, who said, the next thing is to stitch up your ass. Which I don't know, I mean, we can interpret it in many different ways, but this was said with a certain type of hatred. But in terms of, in Bulgaria we have this saying, which is a shut up cunt, or a stitched up cunt, actually, that's the thing, it's stitched up, literally this is the thing. And it is used to name women who don't always want to have sex. They just have the right to choose at a certain point to not have sex, or to reject somebody, or to want to have sex with somebody else that is not appropriate, for instance, with a woman. And this is what we use to, I mean, not I don't use it. I made it. Yeah, that's what I also wanted to kind of react to in this literal way, and to say, well, I have the right to do this if I want. So that's another thing. Another thing is that actually closing the vagina is, well, vaginas are the thing in the female body, of course the breast as well, but mostly the vagina, which is considered to be the very female thing, the thing that is related to giving birth, the thing that makes you, what's the word in English? Makes you be a woman that is supposed to be functioning as a woman, according to these different stereotypes. This is your nature, how many people would say. And this is how the nationalists, or not only them, but people who assign the role of the women to be machines for giving birth and cooking. This is what they say. Well, you have a cunt. You have this birth-giving organ that is supposed to be functioning, and if it is not functioning, then there's something wrong with you. You are to be trashed. You just like go to the garbage. You're a gender. So, and that's a new thing. This is just like a very fashionable word right now in Bulgaria. This is the word of the year. You are a gender. So that's how I react to this as well. And it is very literate, and it goes into the body. And I think the body is very important to be present in this very visceral and physical, not just a symbol. I mean, it's a symbolic gesture, obviously, but it is. I'm not doing it only as a picture. I'm not using animal bodies to metaphorize. I'm just doing it to myself. And including the body as something that is very physical and you can touch in order to think about it. So yeah, that's and of course women as a birth-giving machines. This is something which is a capital. It is part of capitalism. Women objectified as a fucking machine is also a part of the accumulating capital. And women giving birth to certain nations, certain ethnicities, certain races, or women having sex with people, like with men that are from different race, and then giving birth to children that are mixed race. So this all goes through there. So in a way, it is a symbolic gesture, but at the same time, it's a very physical shutting down of a lot of these things. Yeah. Close the factory. They close the factory. Shut down the factory. They propose it.
Well, first of all, you're great. I loved your presentations, each one of you. And I have a question directly to Mariana specifically. I'm a huge fan of Donna Haraway, and I love how she took the Lynn Margulis concept of symbiosis and then just unpack and put it out there into the world. And but I think I'm having a hard time thinking if I'm going to be able to see this new politics that you're talking about, because if I'm not mistaken, posthumanism advocates to include every instance of a human to the term human, or like keep that separate, or like throw that concept into the trash and make up another word or another concept to include us all. So if we're having trouble including other humans into the concept of human, I am very curious, what do you think are going to be these microbiology politics that are going to come? Because they're going to come. I wish, like, I hope I can see those on my days. I'm 35, I'm not that old, but it just seems like so far away, but I hope it comes one day. So what might these microbiology politics could be?
So, can you hear me? Yeah. So first of all, Donna Haraway, as you say correctly, she's not a posthumanist, so she bluntly say it. I don't call it posthuman. It's like there's other authors maybe more, but Donna Haraway doesn't. And I don't think it's about imagining that everyone is a human, you know, like everyone, you know, giving everyone, you know, this status of humans. And I don't think it necessarily has to be a radical change in terms of politics and now where everyone's voting, you know, making everyone a human, you know. I think it's more a change of perspective of what life is worth preserving. So I also think that they have like struggle like thinking about like we're gonna save these animals because they're cute, but like these other insects that are endangered, we're not gonna save, you know? There's microbes, you play with them in an artwork, it's fine. But you would play with a dog, that's completely unacceptable. So I'm just wondering, how can we really return to think life more complexly and accept that they're gonna be dead, there's gonna be pain, but it should not be distributed with capital, you know? That should not be the axis of distribution of pain and death. But I do think that these microbiopolitics are about accepting these things, but not being ruled by capital. That should not be the axis. And this is a change of perspective that I would like us to see before the end of our lives.
Yeah, I was just because this was the idea that I made this performance with in 2004 when things were not that radical all over the world, and now I feel that I'm actually going backwards towards like very basic statements that we have fought for like 30 years, 40 years ago, and this is very heartbreaking, unfortunately. So. Like the perspective of thinking about biotechnology and including all the species within our world and being interspecies, kind of creating this interspecies politics of symbiosis seems to be far, as you said, but at the same time, I don't think this knowledge or these attempts and these ideas, not only Donna Haraway, of course, they are just something that we should forget about a little bit and then inject them again back when the time has come. We should keep them. We should keep them and include them in our very basic human rights or women rights movements, because this is a knowledge that we have and perspectives that we have already accumulated in our societies. So if we throw them away and say, well, it's not the time now, let's wait for a better time, this means that we will have to invent the wheel again, and we'll have to like get another Donna Haraway in 20 years, which doesn't make much sense. It is also, I mean, what I'm saying is very basic for how women movements or feminist ideas have been part of other, like for instance, class struggle. For years, many leftist movements, and not only leftists, neoliberal, they many of them would say, well, let's leave away, like let's leave behind a little bit of women's rights and let's fight for people to have something to eat on their table. This is not the way, because women are also people who eat. And, I mean, all these kind of things. And we have the species around us. We have to think about nature. We have eaten all this nature and turned it into plastic and whatever. So we don't have the luxury anymore to not think Donna Haraway. We have to include this thinking in our basic things that we have to fight for.
Another question? Hi, thank you very much. I enjoyed very much all of your presentations, but this is a question also for Mariana. What can you say about this new way of doing science? Why is it happening? Because it would seem as if science, especially biology, is colliding with art more and more, not just in the way that we standardize the colors of the leaves when we do field studies, but also in the way we are searching for new ways to think about the living and colliding with art in these new kinds of speculation and ways of thinking. Why do you think this is happening now?
I don't know if this is okay. I love your question. I'm very interested in transdiscipline, and I actually think that the thing is that in the first place, this difference shouldn't have emerged. because we are trying to understand the world and deal with the world. And then in order to face or understand very specific and complex things, someone said, okay, I'm gonna do math, and I'm gonna do physics, and I'm gonna do biology. But then we realized that things are way more complex than we thought. So after going very deep in, let's say, two cultures in the 20th century, now we realize that in order to understand complex phenomena, we have to come together with all the knowledges that we have developed. So even if we have very deep knowledges, we have the need to also collaborate with people that have very deep knowledge in other fields, and also to generate starting to learn. So my background is art history, but now I read mostly microbiology books, But as I told you, I think your question is very pertinent, and I hope that this will be the trend, that we will all start to realize that in order to face the complexities of the present, we will also have to start working transdisciplinarily. And it also means that we have to overcome our pride, our disciplinary pride, and let's say, okay, let's hear what the others have to say. Sometimes art is very critical to scientists. Scientists don't even want to hear what artists have to say, And then when we become a little bit humble, then we all start to learn and to find creative questions. And when you ask the right questions, then you might get some answer.
Another question? We still have time for questions, remarks, points of view. Well, maybe if Donna Haraway is so accurate, it's because she's a philosopher, an ethologist, and also a biologist. So she's a transdisciplinary by herself. If nobody wants to speak, I have a small announcement to make. Tomorrow we will start at 10, and it is in the UNAM, in the Instituto de Investigaciones Filosóficas. You have the web, on the web you have the map to go there. It's easy from the Metro Universidad. And there are buses and taxis, but very low prices taxis from there. It's very easy.
I will post the map on the. I will post the map on the Artima Ciencia webpage and the Facebook of Artima Ciencia. So if you are not Mexican, I will post the map there.
Thank you very much, everybody. Beautiful time.
Gracias a todos por ver.
¿Qué están viendo?
¿Todo?
Porque está,
Toda la
rectángulo.
mesa. Ajá, toda la mesa.
Bueno, nada. Hola.
No, tal vez mañana. Ok. Sí. Mañana voy a hablar por la mañana y voy a hacer
Was this on the internet?
I think it was live on Facebook. Yeah, but I don't know if they are going to keep it.
Yeah, good. Ya la puse a finalizar, pero creo que tenemos que esperar a que se finalice bien, porque no cierra.
Ah, bueno, sí, porque no sé si hay que salvarlo o...
No, porque se supone que se tiene que guardar. Entonces ya le puse a finalizar, pero creo que se tarda un poco.
Ah, bueno.
Sí, pues, porque estamos en
No tengo ni idea.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't able to come to the conference, but I was just tired. Yeah, no, not sick, really, because I'm just kind of a tiredness this morning, and previous days I didn't sleep. So I'm like, we have to go later because for me, you have to go better. Now, means that you show. No, the not seeing, like we have and I really like this.
Esta no cierra, ¿verdad? Ajá, es que eso es lo que quiero ver. No cierra. Es que le puse 100 como 4 veces. Y si lo cerramos.
Le di cerrar, pero me dice que no se formarán los cambios.
No, espérate.
Sí, por eso.
Los chicos de aquí.
That's why I said that visualization, the yeah, and the sound, so the sound will picture the real sound. Yeah, and there was some.
Quería no
limpiar, pero
sí, hay que recoger.
algo que tiene que ver como algo.
Claro,
in a way of rebelling to the new like the
De hecho, sí, lo hice.
Entonces ahí me encuentras ahí, siempre contigo. Pero lo tomas mañana de todas maneras.
no, quería voy a hacer no entiendo todo. Buenas noches. Estuvieron hablando acá. Hablar de estas cosas.
Viene casi mi mamá.
Hoy día, ahora, no era ¿A qué hora?
No, o sea, era como hoy en el día, pero le dijimos que todos íbamos a estar acá y que mejor hasta la noche.
¿Por qué no me mandas la dirección?
Va.
Porque voy a estar por ahí.
No, es más cerca de acá.
Ya. Pero mi hermana me recordamos a Coyacá. Porque ella se cae mal de Coyacá. Yo me fui por acá. Hemos quedado con unos amigos cenar y de ahí como
Ah, ya, quedaron sin ya.
Pero, ¿por qué no sabía?
Te he visto.
Sí, mándame la dirección.
Por el bajo.
No, y la obra es lo que realmente es lo que realmente
Muchas gracias, buenas noches.
You have to come with us all night. Well, how about for a drink, I'm gonna come too. You're invited to Alejandro's mother's house for cheese and wine. I know. I don't go, and I don't wanna leave you today, but I want you to be included in this, so come talk to everybody. You guys talk to everybody. Maybe if you go, I'll go for 20 minutes. Are you gonna go?
Le doy terminar la grabación pero sigue corriendo el reloj. No sé si realmente, porque hasta sale una ventanita que te pregunta si realmente quieres terminar, le das que sí. Pero sigue corriendo el reloj, entonces no sé si realmente ya se detuvo o sigue grabando o qué está pasando.
¿Seguro que quieres finalizar?
Le das finalizar, pero ve cómo sigue el relojito.
Y aquí diría...
Pero hay un relojito y sigue corriendo. Pero allá por aquí, mira, sigue corriendo.
Muchas gracias por todo, Javier.
No sabemos si ya realmente se terminó de grabar o sigue corriendo. No sabes quién iba a estar acá. No quiero apagarla para que
¿Le doy finalizar?
Ah,
Pero...
finalizar transmisión.
Ajá, pero le damos a seguir el reloj.
Sí,
¿No? Si me quiero salir de Chrome me dice que no se han cerrado los cambios. Sí.
Ah, ya reviento.
Yo diría, porque no sé cómo funciona. Y yo ya me quiero ir a mi casa.
De que no te oigan.
¡Ya, que se reviente la transmisión!
Voy a cerrar